I remember the rain. Not just any rain, but the kind that falls like a judgment from the sky, heavy and relentless, turning the world into a blurred grey haze. It was the summer of 1975, in Bell Hollow, Tennessee, a small town tucked away in the hills where the Smoky Mountains start to fade into forgotten valleys. I was 23 then, full of that false courage young men carry, thinking life was just work and weekends. But that night, I saw her, standing there on the side of Old Mill Road, her white dress clinging to her like a shroud, hair plastered down her face. She didn't move, didn't wave, just stood, watching the cars pass by as if she were waiting for something, or someone, to stop. Even now, 50 years later, I wake up sometimes with the sound of that rain in my ears, pounding like a heartbeat that's not my own. I see her in my dreams, clearer than the day I buried my wife or held my first grandchild. It's like she's still out there, in the downpour, her eyes empty but somehow pulling you in. I've kept this story to myself for decades, afraid that saying it out loud would make it real again. But I can't anymore. The weight of it. It's too much for an old man like me. Before I go on, if you're listening to this and these tales of haunted America touch something in you, the way they do me, please, subscribe to Haunted USA Tales. It means more than you know, keeping these stories alive. Because what happened in Bell Hollow isn't just a legend. It happened to me. And it could happen again. Bell Hollow wasn't much of a place back then. Maybe 1,000 souls, if you counted the farms scattered along the winding roads. It sat in a dip between the hills, where the Bell River cut through like a vein, swollen after storms. Folk said the town got its name from the old church bell that used to ring out warnings during floods, back in the 1800s. But by my time, that bell was silent, cracked and forgotten in the steeple of the abandoned Presbyterian church on the edge of town. We were a logging community mostly, men like my father working the mills until their backs gave out. I followed in his footsteps after high school, driving trucks for the lumber company, hauling loads through those narrow mountain passes. I grew up there, the youngest of 4 boys. My mother passed when I was 10, from pneumonia, they said, but I always thought it was the dampness of that valley, the way the mist hung low and never quite lifted. Dad raised us alone, stern but fair, teaching us to respect the land and the stories it held. He'd tell us about the old curses, the kind whispered around campfires. Like the Bell Witch, from down in Adams, not far from us, how she tormented a family back in the early 1800s with slaps and scratches in the night. But our town had its own shadow, the 50-year curse. It started in 1925, or so the elders said. A young woman named Eliza Thorne, engaged to the mill owner's son, was found drowned in the river after a terrible storm. Some claimed she was pushed, jealousy, betrayal, the usual poisons of small-town life. Others said she jumped, heartbroken. But on her deathbed, no, she didn't die right away. She lingered for days. She cursed the town. Every 50 years, she whispered, I'll return in the rain and take what's owed. No one believed it at first. But in 1975, exactly 50 years later, strange things started happening. Folks went missing on rainy nights. Cars would stall on Old Mill Road, and drivers would swear they saw a woman standing there, drenched and still. I laughed it off back then. Superstition, I thought. The ramblings of old-timers nursing beers at the diner. My life was simple. Work during the week, fishing on Saturdays with my brothers, and courting Sarah Jenkins, the girl from the next farm over. We were talking marriage that summer, dreaming of a house away from the hollow, maybe in Knoxville where the air was drier. But the rains came early that year. Unseasonable downpours that flooded the riverbanks and turned the dirt roads to mud. Whispers spread through town like the fog, sightings of Eliza, or her ghost, whatever you wanted to call it. Old man Hargrove claimed he picked her up hitchhiking one night, drove her to the old Thorne homestead, only to find the back seat empty and wet when he arrived. The sheriff dismissed it as drink, but I saw the fear in Hargrove's eyes. It was real to him. I didn't think much of it until July. That's when the build-up started, slow at first, like the first drops before a storm. It began with the dreams. I'd wake up sweating, the image of a woman in white fading from my mind, her hand reaching out as if to pull me under. I'd shake it off, blame the heat or the long hours at work. But then, during the day, little things. I'd be driving my truck back from a delivery, radio crackling with static, and suddenly I'd smell it, lilacs, faint and sweet, like the perfume my mother used to wear. But it wasn't hers. It was wrong, mixed with the rot of river mud. One evening, after a shift, I stopped at the general store for cigarettes. Mrs. Ellis, behind the counter, looked pale as she rang me up. "You hear about Tommy Reed?" she asked, her voice low. Tommy was a kid from school, a few years younger, worked at the gas station. Gone missing 2 nights before, during a squall. His car found abandoned on Old Mill Road, engine still running, wipers slashing back and forth. No sign of him. I nodded, feeling a chill despite the humid air. "Probably ran off," I said, but I didn't believe it. That night, Sarah and I had plans, a drive-in movie in the next town over. But the sky darkened early, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. She called it off, said her folks didn't want her out in the weather. So I stayed home, helping Dad fix a leak in the roof. We worked in silence, the rain pattering above us, until he paused, hammer in hand. "You be careful on those roads, son," he said. "This ain't normal rain." I asked what he meant, and he told me about 1925. He'd been a boy then, but he remembered the disappearances. 5 people, all taken on stormy nights, all last seen near the river. And always, someone spotted her, Eliza, standing in the rain. I shrugged it off, but sleep didn't come easy. The next morning, the river was up, lapping at the bridges. Work was slow. Half the crew called out, claiming sickness or family troubles. I took a short haul to the mill, the truck tires sluicing through puddles. On the way back, the radio cut out mid-song, replaced by a whine of interference. Then, clear as day, a woman's voice hummed a tune, soft, melancholy, like an old hymn. I twisted the dial, but it persisted until I slammed the radio off. Days blurred into weeks, the rain unrelenting. The town felt smaller, folks hurrying indoors at dusk. Sarah grew distant. She'd stare out windows during our visits, as if listening for something. "Do you hear that?" she'd ask, like whispering in the wind. I didn't, but it unnerved me. One afternoon, walking the fields behind my house, I found a patch of ground soaked through, even though the sun had peeked out. In the mud, footprints, small, bare, leading toward the river. They stopped at the bank, vanishing into the water. I told no one. Denial, I suppose. But the tension built. Friends started sharing stories over coffee. Billy Markham said his dog wouldn't go near the woods anymore, barking at nothing. Jenny from the diner swore she saw a figure in her rearview mirror one night, pale face pressed against the glass. And always, the lilac scent, drifting on the breeze before a storm. By mid-August, the disappearances mounted. 3 more, a farmer, a teenage girl, an out-of-towner whose car broke down. Each time, witnesses mentioned the woman in the rain. The sheriff posted warnings, stay indoors during storms, but it did little. I started avoiding Old Mill Road, taking the long way home. But one night, I had no choice. It was August 15th, the anniversary of Eliza's death, or so the old-timer said. I'd worked late, loading logs in the pouring rain. The foreman sent us home early, the mill flooding. My truck's headlights cut through the sheets of water as I drove, wipers thumping like a pulse. The radio was off. I couldn't stand the static anymore. The road wound through the hollow, trees arching overhead like skeletal fingers. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a branch, maybe, or a signpost. But no. There she stood, on the shoulder, dress sodden and translucent, hair like black ropes across her face. She didn't flinch as my headlights washed over her. Just stood, arms at her sides, water streaming down. My heart stuttered. I slowed, instinct kicking in. Help a stranded woman, right? But something held me back. The air in the cab grew cold, my breath fogging the glass. I rolled down the window a crack, rain spitting in. You need a ride. I called, voice barely above the downpour. She didn't answer. Didn't move. But her head tilted, ever so slightly, as if hearing me from afar. Then she raised a hand, pointing, not at me, but past me, toward the river. A chill ran through my bones, deeper than the rain. The lilac smell flooded the truck, overpowering, mixed with decay. I hit the gas, tires spinning in the mud before catching. As I sped away, I glanced in the mirror. She was gone. Vanished, like she'd never been. But the seat beside me, dry before, was now damp, a puddle forming on the floorboard. I made it home, shaking, told Dad what happened. He didn't laugh. Just nodded, face grim. The curse, he said. It's her time. That night, the dreams intensified. I saw Eliza's face clearly, pale, eyes hollow, lips moving in silent words. 50 years, she seemed to say. Take what's owed. The next days were a blur of fear. The town locked down, folks boarding windows against more than wind. Sarah came over, terrified. Her sister had seen the woman too, standing outside their barn. We huddled by the fire, listening to the rain lash the house. Whispers seemed to come from the walls, faint and pleading. Then, the peak came on a night when the storm raged fiercest. I'd gone out to check the barn. Animals spooked, kicking stalls. The wind howled, trees bending low. As I crossed the yard, lightning cracked, illuminating everything in stark white. There she was, at the edge of the property, standing in the rain. Closer this time. I could see details, the dress torn at the hem, skin pruned like she'd been underwater too long. I froze, rain blinding me. She started walking, slow, deliberate steps toward the house. No sound but the storm, yet I felt her presence, a weight pressing on my chest. Panic surged. I ran back inside, bolting the door. Dad was there, shotgun in hand. Stay away, he muttered, but to whom? The knocking started then. Soft at first, like branches tapping. But rhythmic, insistent. We peered through the window, nothing but darkness. Then, a flash of lightning, her face at the glass, eyes locked on mine. Not angry. Sad. Hungry. I backed away, heart pounding. The door rattled, wind or something else. Whispers now, clear, join me. Dad fired a shot into the air outside, but it did nothing. The power cut, plunging us into black. In the silence between thunder, her footsteps circled the house, wet slaps on the porch. It lasted hours. We barricaded ourselves in the living room, praying for dawn. Visions flashed in my mind, the river rising, bodies floating, Eliza's curse unfolding. I saw the town's sins, greed, betrayal, reflected in her gaze. She wasn't just a ghost, she was the Hollow's reckoning, every 50 years claiming souls to balance the scales. As the storm ebbed, the sounds faded. Morning came, grey and dripping. She was gone. But not without cost. That night, 2 more disappeared, neighbours down the road. Their house empty, doors wide, puddles inside. I survived, but changed. Dad passed a year later, his health broken. Sarah and I married, moved to Knoxville, tried to forget. But the scars remained, nightmares, a aversion to rain, that lilac scent triggering panic. 50 years on, it's 2025. Bell Hollow's smaller now, half abandoned after floods and economic rot. But reports trickle in, disappearances during storms, sightings of a woman in white. Last month, a news clip, a hiker missing, car found on Old Mill Road. I watch the weather, wondering if the curse resets. I tell this now because silence doesn't help. Maybe someone hears, believes. Because some curses don't die. They just wait, in the rain, for the next cycle to begin.